Alrighty, good morning everybody. I hope you're feeling very good. What I'm going to do, first of all, is just going to terrify you a tiny bit, just a tiny bit, and then there will be some good news. But essentially what I really want you to understand, both for yourself, for your organizations, for your families, is the importance of brain health. Because we really need to think about the brain. A lot of the conversations that we have around not just food, but also lifestyle are often really focused on maybe aesthetics. We think about food in terms of, is it going to make me fat or thin? Maybe increasingly with the advent of things like Zoe, we're thinking about blood sugar, maybe. We're thinking about longevity, but still, we're not putting those pieces together to help us think about, actually, could we be looking after the most important organ in the body, the one on which we rely on for all of our ideas, our creativity, our productivity, our attention, our thoughts, our plans, our goals, our laughter, all of that stuff comes down to the brain, and it's ironically, strangely, sadly, the organ that we are neglecting. And really quite badly. So there is a growing fiscal cost and economic burden of brain disorders. In the UK in 2019, £117 billion was lost to brain disorders. In the UK, that's largely depression, anxiety, mood disorders, but also things like dementia. Dementia is our leading cause of death in the UK. It's not cancer, it's not heart disease, it's not complications due to diabetes, it's dementia. So in the UK, we have our leading cause of illness and our leading cause of death are conditions associated with the brain. So we really need to be thinking about it much more. And so that's 117 billion is 5% of GDP, and 72% of that, 3/4 of that essentially, is lost productivity. We have a growing burden across Europe. The numbers just stack up each time there is a review. And in the US, we're hitting nearly, and I think basically now, we're hitting nearly $1 trillion in lost productivity due to brain disorders. So it's something we really need to start thinking about, and certainly it is what the World Health Organization is thinking about. So the Federation of European Neuroscience Society says that we are in a brain health emergency. And the World Health Organization says, okay, we get it. Now we have to focus on it as our priority for the next decade. And this is why I think actually organizations can now start to be ahead of the curve by aligning their ideas and their ideals and their goals for their organizations with these World Health Organization and FEN's goals. So, what is the state of play? This is the part where I start to terrify you. As I said, depression is the leading cause of global disability. And what that means is that more days are lost of work, of school, of college, of lost quality of life, people not enjoying their friendships, their relationships as much from depression than any other condition, more than cancer, more than, and things that need you to be in hospital for periods of time. So it's our leading cause of global disability and loss of quality of life. Stress, when we ask people about mental health, so more than stress about money, more than stress about family, more than stress about relationships, stress about mental health is the top obstacle to productivity at work. And we know that as both within generations and across generations, there is more attrition. More people are saying, I am leaving this organization because of the impact on my mental health as we go along. So partly there's the question around, is this something about the generations themselves? And I think there's a valid question, and we can certainly have a conversation about that, about the particular challenges of these generations. But also, is there something about work? Is there something about the environment that's actually converging to make it very difficult for people to feel like they can stay well and stay productive and stay working every day at the moment? And yes, we've had a very difficult last few years, and partly this is about helping people to start to feel better, both in terms of looking after them and helping them to look after themselves. And as I say, Not only is dementia the leading cause of death in the UK, and the levels are growing across the world. And also, when I say dementia, I really want you to hear brain aging, because I really think about dementia as a model of brain aging. It's like we turn up the speed dial on brain aging when we think about dementia. So it's not simply about, getting older, and also it's not simply about genetic risk. Only about 5% of dementia cases are genetically driven. The rest are what we call sporadic disease. And we understand that around 40% of global Alzheimer's disease cases could be delayed or prevented through changes in lifestyle. So again, that's helping people to understand that our leading causes of disease burden are preventable and that we can protect ourselves from them, but we need to have that information so that we can enact it. And when you ask people, if I stopped any of you on the street and said, well, assuming that you're over 40, I mean, you all look so young. If I stopped you and asked you, what illness are you most afraid of developing? Most people say dementia, and it makes sense because it's the disease that we don't have a cure for. We have good treatments for things like cancer, as frightening as they are, but we have no cure for dementia. We don't even have very, very good medications or treatments that can intervene, although nutrition, ironically, is the most powerful prevention that we have for brain aging. So, the challenge of an aging workforce, actually, I think, more than the physical challenges, is going to be the challenge of declining population brain health. And that starts across the lifespan. We need to not just start thinking about things when they go wrong. This is one of the issues that happens in mental health. We don't apply the principle of prevention. When it comes to physical health, for example, we ask children, we teach them to brush their teeth well and start flossing so that we can prevent cavities. We teach teenagers not to smoke and not to vape, hopefully, so that we can prevent lung cancer and pulmonary diseases. But in mental health, we don't do that. In mental health, what we do is we wait for something to go wrong first. We wait for the bout of depression. We wait for the panic attacks. We wait for someone to feel like they can't turn up to work. And then we say, ooh, let's see if we can bring you back to baseline. Let's see if we can kind of patch you up and get you back to work. There is absolutely no reason for us to do that. We absolutely know that there are preventable interventions, things that we can start implementing day by day, little tiny things that build up physiological resilience. And so it's about getting that message out that actually it's not just that we want to look after you once you're unwell. We want to tool you up. We want to skill you up in knowing how to stay well and to prevent the onset of these conditions, which, as I say, are our leading causes of disease burden. So that's the challenge. The good news is that actually the brain itself is very compelling. It can be quite difficult to kind of motivate people. We've all tried to lose weight at one time or another. It's boring. It's hard work. It's hard to stick to. It's not particularly motivating. But all of the things that I'm going to talk to you about now, all of those things are independent of weight loss and have a meaningful and actually quite quick impact. So the brain is very compelling in terms of motivating people to utilize and engage with benefits and other offerings. For example, actually, let me have a little sip. For example, if I told you that eating more seaweed during pregnancy will increase your child's IQ in a statistically significant and correlative way, suddenly you're listening. This is the research on iodine. Iodine deficiency is called by the World Health Organization the leading cause of preventable brain damage worldwide. And the reason I'm talking to you about pregnancy is because, as I say, I think mental health starts at conception, and it's about helping people to stay well for as long as possible. So I'm just popping it into your minds now. You don't necessarily need to worry about this for your employees. But iodine deficiency is a leading cause of preventable brain damage. We know that people who grow up in areas of insufficient iodine have permanently suppressed IQs of 15 points up to 15 IQ points because their mothers didn't get enough iodine during pregnancy. Usually that's an issue that used to be a problem in the Alps because iodine is found in seaweed and seafood. So it used to be a problem in the Alps and landlocked parts of the world, the central states of the USA, that kind of thing. 67% of pregnant British women are iodine deficient. So we have an issue in an island nation where we're surrounded by fish and seafood. We still have deficiency as the norm in a nutrient that we know is absolutely essential for brain development. So our issues around nutrition and the brain and the opportunities to enhance our brain health start early, and the problems start early as well. If I told you that a daily serving of leafy greens can slow brain aging by 11 years, suddenly you're more incentivized to go to the salad bar at lunch and, to give yourself a little side salad than you might have been before. So this is data on older people. So what you do is to get them to take a food frequency questionnaire, you test them every few years, and then you scan their brains. And what they found is that a small cereal bowl serving of leafy green vegetables slowed brain aging so that those who had them every day had brains that were 11 years younger compared to those who didn't. A very simple, easy intervention that once people have that information, they can implement. So it's about having the education, the nutritional, lifestyle education, and then just making that available. Did you know this? Also, we have a salad bar. Have at it, right? So, something as simple as hydration. I noticed that the water bottles are way back in the back of the room. But we know, for example, that when you become mildly dehydrated, actually your cortisol levels go up. But this is really relevant for children as well, because as your cortisol goes up, we call it a stress hormone, but its entire function is really about energy availability for that stress response. So for the fight and flight, what cortisol does is to release glucose into your bloodstream, release fatty acids into your bloodstream so that you have the energy for your brain, which runs on glucose. It cannot run on anything else. And your muscles to be able to run away and fight, and so your brain can think about the exit strategy. But also what cortisol does, in order to give you that sense of motivation, is to create a sense of agitation, right? You start to feel a little bit tetchy, a little bit itchy, a little bit kind of irritated, irritable. And so we know that. And we know that that happens when your blood sugar drops. We know that that happens when you're hungry. And we know that it happens when you're dehydrated. So, for example, if this is happening in school, and lots of schools are removing water bottles because they're distracting, they make noises, kids have to get up and go and pee a lot. Actually, a child doesn't necessarily know that that feeling of agitation isn't the fact that they hate Billy that they're sitting next to, but actually is dehydration. And we might not get that little fact as well. So little tiny things like this. We know that adequate hydration in middle-aged people is associated with better memory function, better task switching, so the ability to move from someone's having a conversation with me over here, they're reminding me that I need to send an email to Janice, and also I need to prep that slide for a talk that I've got this afternoon, moving between different cognitive domains without losing efficiency, which I'm sure is something that all of us have to do a lot of time, maintain that flexibility, maintain that efficiency. And the ability, it improves sustained attention, so essentially the ability to stay on track with something, and particularly something that is a bit boring. So staying hydrated, polyphenols do this as well. If you have about 200 grams of fresh blueberries or other brightly colored fruit, within 90 minutes you have better memory performance, you have better functional activity, you have better connectivity, you have more blood flow in the front of your brain, because what those polyphenols do is to keep those blood vessels nice and flexible. They help more blood flow through to the front of your brain, and that helps your brain to function better, stay sharper, because your brain is the hungriest organ in your body. It is the organ that has the highest metabolic rate. So when we talk about basal metabolic rate, if you've ever had to try to calculate your basal metabolic rate because you've been trying to work out how many calories a day you should have, the biggest single contribution to your basal metabolic rate is your brain. It has the highest energy demand, and with that has a comes a huge nutrient demand. And what's not happening with the way that we eat, the way that we feel, is that we're not feeding our brains properly. We're not getting the best out of our brains, and we're not giving them what they need to function well in the long term. So there's a little bit around kind of nutrition, but also what a brain focus does is to help enhance the attractiveness of perhaps things that you're already offering. So just as an example, if you already offer gym memberships or reduced price on bikes and cycling, we know that improved cardiovascular fitness increases the hippocampus, the size of the hippocampus. The hippocampus is the part of the brain that is considered the seat of memory. It's the part of the brain that gets bigger when cab drivers do the knowledge. It's the part of the brain that is damaged most in Alzheimer's disease. And staying physically active keeps it healthy. So you can start to shift the focus and to try to make these other benefits more compelling by saying, actually, this isn't about weight loss, and this isn't about just staying well physically. This is about staying well mentally for a long time. Similarly, in older women, and women have twice the risk of Alzheimer's disease compared to men, we know that resistance training, so if you take a group of women, half of them do resistance training 3 times a week, half of them do stretching or gentle walking, although walking can increase the hippocampus as well, 3 times a week. The women who do the resistance training have fewer and smaller areas of damage in the brain compared to those who do not. And it's also about having a positive attitude towards aging. We can be quite miserable about aging. When I ask people about aging, they talk about failing, crumbling, decay. These are the words that come up. But our beliefs about aging actually inform and influence the way that we do age. So actually it's about having an optimistic, positivistic view of aging and being able to express that across the organization, and that's going to help us to stay well, stay optimistic, stay engaged with all of these things that will help support our physical and mental health. So, healthy aging in workplaces, for me, it's about staying mentally and neurologically well, and that's not just for the organization, but it's things that you can take home as well, because as I say, this is a broader issue that cuts across basically all of the UK, most of Europe, and the rest of the world. There are opportunities around targeting the brain because it's compelling, accessible, and less stigmatizing than other ways of framing interventions. You can create a comprehensive wraparound opportunity by providing, for example, brain nutrition education, and then making sure that those offerings are easily accessible and available in your organizations. And the benefits, if you think about the fiscal costs and the loss of productivity, include retention, better mental health, productivity, and cost savings. And importantly, this cuts across the lifespan. This is about a long-term, comprehensive, protective intervention to help support not just you, not just your organizations, but potentially the entire nation. Thank you very much.
Amazing. Thank you for that, Kimberly. Hello, everyone. I'm Jo Galich. I'm Content Director at Reba. I'm going to be chatting with Kimberly about some of the fascinating insights that you've just shared with us. And please do ask Kimberly any questions via the Slido QR code or just log in. The first one, Kimberly, and I'm going to go straight to Slido because these guys are more important than my questions. It says good food requires money or time or both. How is this realistic for low-paid employees who can barely pay their rent?
I mean, this is one of the things that I campaign for, because actually one of the issues that comes up is the idea, well, the issue and the idea that good food should be expensive. So there's a way in which there's the focus on food and the way food should be, and there's an idealization of food that means we often think that it has to be slabs of prime salmon and all of these sorts of things, and that's not true. So I think there's a reconfiguration that needs to happen around what good food can be and what nutritious food can be, and that includes things like frozen food products, beans, and those sorts of things. But I think largely this is an issue about the way that foods are marketed and priced. It shouldn't be the case that it's a bag of apples is £3 compared to, a bag of chips. That actually there should be a way, and this is what I mean when I say accessibility, is it's not fair to say people are making bad choices. It's about what's available to them. So this is why I campaign in the book for better legislation. I campaign and complain about the inability and the poor access and the inequality to access to good food. But I think it's a broader question about wages and benefits rising with inflation, the subsidizing of nutritious foods, food deserts and all sorts of things. So it's a big question, and I think it needs a broader answer, a broader collective intervention.
Definitely, and you do go into that in a lot of detail in the book, which is fantastic if you haven't yet read it. There is so much to learn about brain health. What are the top 3 things that everyone can do?
The first one I would say beans, greens, and oily fish.
Okay, we can do that. We can all do that.
Beans provide fibre. Fibre produces short-chain fatty acids, essentially, that protect the blood-brain barrier, which stops toxic compounds from crossing from the blood into the brain. And there isn't a single age group in the UK which is meeting the fibre recommendation. No one's getting enough fibre, so eat more beans. Greens, for the reason that I mentioned, the leafy greens slow brain aging, and oily fish because omega-3 fatty acids are like the bricks that build the membrane around your brain cells. You cannot make them, so you have to get them from your diet. There's a slide I have in my deck which shows that if you're not eating enough of them, not only does your brain shrink, but during pregnancy, again, babies' brains are smaller when there isn't enough omega-3 fatty acid in the diet. So it's essential. You have to get it from your diet, and that requires about 1 portion of mackerel a week would do it, and most people aren't eating that. Yeah.
And what initiatives would you recommend for employers? Oh, sorry, the question's just jumped. Employers to run. I think I can remember it. What initiatives would you recommend employers run to get communicating and talking about brain health and get this conversation within the workplace?
So you could get some qualified speakers in. So I think it starts with, you can phrase it, because I think there is a big conversation about mental health, which is lovely and important, but actually we separate the idea of mental health from the organ from which mental health emerges. And so I think it's actually about connecting mental health with brain health. So it's like the idea that a symphony doesn't come out of nowhere. A symphony comes out of an orchestra of musicians working together, and the same thing. Mental health doesn't emerge from nowhere. It comes out of the brain. So it could be, I think, positioned in terms of we care about mental health, and that includes brain health, and here's how we're going to help support you with your brain health practices. That includes a piece of education, which is what is the brain, how do you nourish it, how do you take care of it, and then that would need to be, I think, associated with here are the healthy food offerings we have in our in-house restaurants, and here is the opportunity for you to engage in regular exercise, and we're going to make sure that our work practices don't interrupt your sleep and all of those sorts of things. So a little bit of education, and then linking that to what is offered.
And there's another question that's come through here. How can I recommend employees eat better without causing offence?
I wouldn't necessarily. I think it's less about recommending. It's not about telling. Like I say, I think actually brain health is compelling on its own. Once people know 1 or 2 pieces of information and they realize that it's quite easy to implement, it becomes a self-motivating thing. We all have brains that we want to look after. Quite often we might have parents or family members who are having the early signs of dementia and memory loss. We start to feel quite motivated for ourselves to be concerned about it. And in the other direction, chronologically, people are thinking, how do I take care of my child's brain health? What's going on with increasing rates of neurodevelopmental conditions like ADHD and Alzheimer's and autism? And so I think it's compelling. So I don't think it needs to be recommended. I think the information needs to be made available. And then I think actually my experience is that it's a very self-motivating proposition.
And there's lots of just nutrition questions coming in for you now, Kimberly.
do a quick fire round.
We'll try and get through as many as possible.
Sure.
So what would you recommend for vegetarians and vegans who can't eat oily fish?
Vegetarians and vegans who can't eat oily fish, don't like the taste, allergic, what you will need is a vegan algae-based supplement, so not one that's based on walnuts, chia seeds, flax seeds, that is technically omega-3, but it's not the type of omega-3 you need for brain health, and your body will not be able to convert that plant-based version into the one you want. But the algae-based source you will, because essentially what happens is the algae produce the DHA, the fish eat the algae, concentrate it in their bodies, and then we eat the fish, so you're just cutting out the middleman. So an algae-based omega-3, that is 500 milligrams per day of combined DHA and EPA.
Perfect, thank you. And that should also answer whoever asked the question saying they hate fish, I mean really hate fish. So hopefully that answers your question. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. I know that we could sit and chat with Kimberly all day and ask her all of the questions. Just a huge, huge thank you for joining us this morning, Kimberly. A round of applause.